And so today, allow me to focus on tackling the comprehension passages in both session 1 and session 2 of our English lesson today. Remember, we said from the outset that the English paper is made up of 3 parts. I'm talking about paper 1 here. It's made up of 3 parts. Part 1 is what we call the closed test, which we say deals mainly with the parts of speech. And then part 2, we talked about the syntax area, which we say deals mainly with the general rules of grammar, which we're going to tackle in a few days. And then part 3 deals with the comprehension passages. Now, these comprehension passages are the ones we want to tackle today. Now, a comprehension passage tests your ability to read, understand, and interpret information. It tests your ability to read, understand, and interpret information. Remember, to comprehend, from which the word comprehension is derived, means to understand. And a comprehension tests your understanding of a given passage or a given story. And so it is important that before you any comprehension question, that you comprehend passage from those questions are set, or the passage on which the questions are based. And therefore today we will attempt to unravel the mystery behind tackling the comprehension passages. Now remember, passages will test your ability to, number 1, read, number 2, understand, and number 3, interpret. So reading, basically from the stages of learning language. And remember, in the stages of learning language, we start with listening. So you listen, you surround yourself with speakers of the language, you listen to them. Because the ear is one of the inlets of language. So you listen to language. Then from listening, you will go to the second step, which is speaking. So you are able to speak what you have heard. That is why if you are a Luo, some of them speak Fis, because that is what they have heard. That is what they have been exposed to. There are those who will speak, for example, those who will speak things like English words that by the mother tongue, because a Luo that is among the Kikuyu, for example, then your language will be corrupted by what you hear from that end. And therefore listening also is an inlet of language, because then you have the ear to allow you to listen. Then you speak what you have heard. Then from speaking, we move to the next step of learning, which is reading. And so an examiner would like to know whether you have gone through the first 2 stages. Have you listened and have you spoken? Therefore, it is important that for you to read successfully, for you to read, and you know, reading comes in stages. You can read without comprehending. Remember, at the lower levels of learning, when you are in PP, you are in grade 1, grade 2, sometimes you read without comprehending what you're reading. You read words that you don't know what they mean until someone tells you what they mean. There are people who can read words by joining sounds without necessarily comprehending what those words mean. And so it is important, first of all, to read and then understand what you are reading. Those 2 are very critical. Not just reading, but to read and understand what you have read, based on the first 2 stages of learning. And then, of course, the 4th stage after reading is writing, which is the last stage. So reading is also an inlet of language. It's also an inlet of language. And then, of course, writing and speaking are outlets of language. So what you listen to, you speak. And then what you read, you write. So let us go from there. An examiner would like to know whether you are able to read and not just read, understand, and then interpret. And therefore, for you to attempt the comprehension passages successfully, one of the things we must understand is the problems that we face, which are the challenges that make us unable to attempt those passages successfully, which are some of the challenges that as a learner we may encounter. And let us go to those challenges. Challenge number one that as a learner you may face that will lead to your inability to tackle the questions successfully, or will lead to problems in tackling the passages. One of the challenges we may face is poor reading. Poor reading. That is one of the poor reading. Yes, Purity, your hand is raised.
Pardon.
Your hand is raised.
Pardon, the last statement.
I've said that one of the challenges that we may face when we are preparing or as we tackle the passages would be poor reading of the passage. And poor reading, I think, can be broken down into several other things. For example, poor reading could involve, number one, inability to read. Number one could be inability to read. Inability to read. There are those of us who are unable to read. You are unable to read some sentences in the passage or within the context of the passage that you have been given. There are those non-readers who by the time you are in class 8 are still unable to read. And so we expect you to be able to read. So the first thing you have to do to tackle the passage properly, work on your ability to read. So to read, first of all, you start by combining sounds if you're unable to read now. And then from combining sounds, you go to 2, 3 word letters, two sound words, 3 sound words, combine those sounds to read simple words, then to sentences, then to storybooks, and so that you are able to practice how to read over and over again. And so you should be an astute reader. You should be a good reader in order to cure this problem. So practice how to read over and over again. I'm sure most of you in this class are able to read, so that may not be much of a challenge. Now, the second thing about poor readership is reading too fast. Reading too fast. Reading too fast. Especially when you are in the second stage, of the passage, second stage or third stage, second stage, that you read the story too fast. When you see children, it is common knowledge that when you do anything too fast, then you're bound to make mistakes. For example, assume you attend church, for those who go to church, or you attend the mosque, for those who go to mosque, you attend Salah, for those who go to the mosque. And then the preacher or the imam for the day is too fast. When the imam is giving his khutbah, or when the preacher is giving his sermon for the day, is very fast, talking very fast. Then you'll find that at the end of that sermon or at the end of the khutbah, you'll have understood nothing. And so you'll pick maybe 1 or 2 things. But if the sermon or the khutbah is slow and calculated, then you are able to pick out quite a number of things. Even if I am teaching you now as I teach, when I am too fast, then you come out with almost nothing. So even in reading, it is important that you read deliberately slowly, that you should read deliberately slowly so that you internalize everything that you read. So take your time and read slowly. Do not be in a hurry. Just take your good time. Remember, you have 30 minutes to tackle the passage, and so you should not be in a hurry. You should not be in a hurry to finish. So read slowly. Now, number 2 problem, I've talked about about poor reading. The second problem that we may face, and which is a very, very serious problem, is lack of concentration. The second one is lack of concentration. Roman 2, lack of concentration. Now, lack of concentration is a common problem, but many of us do not have a long enough span of concentration to go through the comprehension passages keenly enough. And so you find as you read the passage, you want to know who is talking in class, who has just gone by the window, who is walking around the class. You want to turn around and observe the teacher as the teacher walks around. You want to know what's happening just out. So this concentration is hampered by this persistence in focusing on other things. It is important that you focus on the passage that you are reading. Focus on the passage, because that focus will enable you to handle the questions successfully. It will enable you to internalize what you are reading. It will enable you to have a flow, a continuous flow of ideas, a continuous flow of the story that you have read. So to register the story, you need to concentrate on what you are reading. Imagine you are reading a story, say up to paragraph 2. Then something interferes. Maybe there's a blast or there's a noise, shouts, and you're reading. If you go back to reading, even if you start from the point where you left, it follows that you will have forgotten what you may have read in the previous paragraphs. So it is important that you concentrate on what you're reading. Forget about every other person in the class. Forget about every other thing. Forget about every other thing back at home. Concentrate on the story that you are reading. So lack of concentration is another very serious problem. It's another very serious problem. And then the final thing I would like to tackle on this area, number 3, would be what I would call poor timing. Poor timing or poor time management. Poor time management. How much time do you spend on the comprehension? How much time do you spend on each of the passages? How much time do you spend on reading? How much time do you spend on answering the questions? So that you need to have ample time. And so if you were to take, say, 30 minutes on one passage, you'd be home and dry, because you have an hour and 40 minutes. So you spend 30 minutes on one passage, 30 minutes on the other, and then you have another 40 minutes to tackle the rest of the paper. You should be able to tackle the passage. And this can work for you if you follow the steps that you're going to discuss in a short while. But you need to manage your time well as that you're not rushing through the story, or you're not rushing through the questions. Take your time to tackle the questions. Take your time to read the story. The more time you spend on the story, the more likely you are to understand what you are reading, the more likely you are to score higher. To spend a little bit more time than you have been doing before on the story that you are reading. Any question up to that point? Kindly mute. 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 I'm saying mute. This Emily is very stubborn, eh? Very stubborn. So now, once we know the problems, and once we have identified a few of the problems that we may face, then now we could go to how to solve those problems. Which are the steps that we could follow so that we are not caught up in the trap? Which are the steps that we could follow so that we treat the challenges that we may face in tackling those passages? And so let us go to the steps to follow in tackling the passages, the steps that we could follow, steps of tackling the passage. And there are as many variations to these steps as there are heads, or as there are brains but I would like to give you my own and see if we could apply it and if it would work for us. So let us go through those steps briefly, the steps that we could follow. So the first step number one in tackling the passage. Step number one, read the passage. Sorry, skim through the passage. 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 Now, to skim, S-K-I-M, is to go or move quickly and lightly over something. So you go over it. You go over your passage quickly. It is an act of reading something quickly or superficially. So you are merely reading it superficially. Your focus is on familiarizing yourself with the content and the structure of the passage. So you're just reading it superficially. You're not taking, you're not paying much attention to the detail. You read superficially, just like you skim through a borrowed newspaper. So you just want to get the gist of the story. What is the a rough idea of what the story is about? So get a gist of the story. What is the tense of the story? What is the storyline? What is the theme of the story? What is the setup of the story? So skim through the passage in a bid to be familiar with what the passage is all about. That is the first reading. Skim through the passage. Attempt to read through the passage. And this step is quick. It is quick. Remember, we have said it is a quick reading through the story. Quick and superficial. So this stage is very quick, it's very fast. So spend very little time on this. Read through the passage quickly in order to be familiar with what the passage is about. Now, once you have read through the passage quickly to be familiar with what it is about, then the next stage of tackling the passage would be to go through the questions. Go through the questions. Go through the questions. Now, to go through the questions, going through the questions before reading will prepare you to focus on the things that you need to look at in the passage. So you need to have a quick overview of the question. I'm going to a quick overview. So in this case, I am saying that a quick overview of the questions is sufficient. Just go through, not the alternatives, just the questions, so that you have a rough idea of what the examiner requires of you from the passage. So your mind will be focused on what you are looking for. So take a quick overview of the questions that you will be tackling. Go take a quick overview of the passage. That is step number 2. So you have a quick overview of the questions that you are required to tackle from the passage, so that it prepares you, it focuses your mind on what the examiner requires of you. Step number 3. Step number 3, read the passage. Read the passage. Read the passage. Read the passage for comprehension. Read the passage for comprehension. That is now the second reading. Read the passage for comprehension. Now, in this stage, remember, during this stage, you are attempting to understand to have a deep understanding of what the passage is about. Therefore, it is important, number one, that you read slowly. You read slowly and carefully. So number one, read slowly and carefully. By this time, you know what you are required. You know what the examiner requires of you. You know the question, the items that you are required to deal with. So you read slowly and carefully so that you internalize the passage. Slowly and carefully go through the passage. Number two, at this stage, apart from reading slowly and carefully, underline the difficult words. Underline the difficult words or phrases. Underline the difficult words or phrases. Underline the difficult words or phrases. Underline do not stop reading. As you read, even when faced with a difficult word or phrase, read over it and continue reading so that you have the flow of the passage. But underline it as you read. The reason you underline is so that you go back to them at a later stage. But at this stage, just go through the passage so that you are able to have, so that you have the whole story as a unit in your registering in your memory. Then from there, we now move to stage 4. Stage 4 of tackling the passage would be the fourth stage would be now attempt to understand the difficult words and phrases. Attempt to understand the difficult words and phrases. As used in the passage, as they are used in the passage, as used in the passage. So go back to the difficult words you underlined, and you can do this by inference or by deduction. We call it inference. So you attempt to understand the difficult words or phrases by inference or by deduction. So go back to the words you underlined. Read the sentence before the word or the sentence after the word so that you are able to understand the words based on their particular use in the passage. Based on their particular use in the passage. So attempt to understand the difficult words as used in the passage. You are trying to promote your understanding of the passage. Remember, however, that you are not expected or even required to understand all the words in the passage. Sometimes it may prove impossible to understand all the words, but it is most important that you understand the story, that you understand the message, that you understand the passage as a whole, and what the writer of the passage intends to communicate. So once you have inferred the meaning of the meanings of the words, difficult words, and then the meanings of the difficult phrases, then now we go to step number 5. Step number 5, we read the passage as we answer the question. Read the passage as we answer the questions. Read the passage as you answer the questions. Now, this stage is very critical. It's very critical. So that you will, step number 1 in this stage, let us have Roman 1 in this stage. You will read the question. This is now the second reading of the questions. Remember, you had read the questions the first time. So you read the question. Read and understand the question. Read and understand the question. That is stage 1. Read and understand the question. We are still at 5 Roman 1. Read and understand the question. Of course, underline the keyword of the question. Find out what the examiner is looking for. Be certain of what the question is all about. Once you read and understand the question, Romans 2, identify the source paragraph. Identify the source paragraph or sentence of the question. Identify the paragraph or sentence of the question from the passage. In other words, go back to the passage and identify alternatives. Identify part of the passage the question has been set from. So identify the source paragraph or sentence of the question. Identify the source paragraph or sentence of the question. Identify the source paragraph or sentence of the question. And underline the possible source of your answer. Underline the possible answer. Let's just say and underline the possible answer. The source to identify the possible answer or the possible guide to the answer. So underline the possible answer. Then by the time now you command 3, you have idea what the answer to the question should be. So read the alternatives and select the best. Roman 3, read the alternatives, read the given alternatives and select the best. Number 3, read the possible alternatives and select the best. Number 3, read the possible alternatives and select best. Read the possible alternatives and select the best. Number 4, and finally, read the question again. Read the question again to confirm the relevance of your answer. Read the question again to confirm the relevance. Read the question again to confirm the relevance of your answer. Read the question again to confirm the relevance of the answer you have chosen. Read the question again to confirm the relevance of the answer you have chosen. Any question up to that point? Any question up to that point? Any question? Any question? Any question? Have we learned anything? Have we learned something?
Yes.
I hope we have captured something.
Yes. Yes.
All right, thank you. If you have Alima, you've lost quite a lot. Alima.
Yes.
A lot. You've lost quite a lot. Because we are just winding up the most important part. But I'll try.
Okay.
Lose up. Next, come in good time. So, insight on what you need to.
Pardon?
I've said any question up to that point. I'm asking if there's any question. So we are clear up to that point. Now, if we are clear up to that point, then we have what we need of the comprehension passage. So what I do is, we take a 5-minute break. Then when we get back in the second session, I will go through again for the sake of those who have come in late. That includes Halima, includes someone else who just arrived. I think someone else. It's Unity or someone. Bye here. Bye. Unity. What is the bye about? So that we now go after going through this, then we'll now go through a sample passage. That is the passage you tackled, and see how you apply the steps on that passage and how the steps work. Will that be fair enough?
Yes.
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 5 minutes have been at 11. Eh? 11. Alima, don't be.
Yeah.